Welcome to Passion. I'm your host, Britt Ivy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have with us author and speaker, Judy Squier. Hi, Judy. Thank you for joining us.
It's a treat, Britt.
Wonderful. It's great to have you back on Passion, and a lot has been going on in your life since you were here last. You have an additional book. We spoke the first time about His Majesty and Brokenness, and that was such a fun interview, hearing about how that book came to be. And I may have you speak about your golden shoe again. I just love this little shoe and what it symbolizes. And we're also going to speak about your second book. Congratulations, Living in the Names of God.
God is the author and finisher. I'm truly not an author. So He is the one that sits me down and takes me through life and the experiences, and all of a sudden they're a book. I wish it was that easy.
It sounds easy, the way you put that. It truly sounds easy. And you're so humble. I mean, some people hope their whole entire lives to write a book or even a poem. And you've written 2. And you do make it sound easy, but I'm sure the journey has not been easy. So why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about how the second book was prompted in you? How did that come out of you? And did you expect to write a second book when you had finished the first?
I never expected to write a first book, but someone said, Judy, you have a book in your belly. And so I took writing classes and wrote the first book. His Majesty and Brokenness is story after story, how Jesus showed up in my life, even when I didn't see Him. Well, I did see El Shaddai, which is the name of God for the All-Sufficient One. I did see Him at a dire place in my life. I'm disabled. My husband, David, and I have 3 little
children.
girls. And he's up on a ladder doing my honey-do list, and he tumbles down and shatters his ankle.
Oh my
And
goodness.
what had surgeries, was hospitalized, was walking with crutches. And so at that point in time, I just said, I need help. Send the troops. So that's when I discovered the name El Shaddai. He is the one that can do anything, and He especially shines when we realize we can't do a thing. So El Shaddai showed up, and he's in the book, and then 17 other names. And I found out with some of those other names that they had shown up decades earlier, but I didn't recognize them. So as a writer, you live experiences a second time.
Yes.
And for me, the second time around, I could spot Him.
Amazing.
And so those were the stories I wrote.
Wow, that's just amazing. Thank you. So just to clarify, you were watching as your husband fell from the ladder? You were there?
No.
Okay.
We were out looking for Halloween costumes.
Okay.
And so I had given him the list, his Saturday list.
Right.
And he, being faithful and an engineer, he's got to finish his list before sundown. So we found out when we got home that he was in the ER.
Oh my goodness.
And when he arrived, he said, you've got to save my legs. My wife has none.
Oh,
and
wow.
the ER nurse thought it was delirium.
Oh my goodness.
So,
She didn't know he was telling the truth. So they saved his legs.
They saved his legs.
But he shattered one part of his body.
He had shattered an ankle in 70 pieces.
70 pieces, my goodness.
But we were right next to Stanford Hospital, and so they took care of him, put him back together.
Wow, that's my home stomping ground.
That's right, we
I
both
have a
were
big
from there.
bias for Stanford Hospital. Of course, they've cared for every member of my family. And
Were you born there?
I wasn't born there. When people say, where are you from, I say Stanford Stables, because I basically grew up in the barn, which is in the middle of the golf course, which is right next to the hospital. It's a beautiful campus. But Amazing. Well, I'm glad he was there and had the best of care.
I know.
So you just came, how did you find out he was in the hospital? How did you come to know he was in the hospital?
From someone who lived in our cottage.
Okay.
And she had been there and called the ambulance, and so that was the welcome home news we had.
Amazing. Well, I love your prayer. I think that's one of God's favorites. Help.
I know.
Help. Well, he was faithful and he helped.
There's a verse, it's from the Message Bible. It says, "Blessed are you when you come to the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more room for God and His kingdom." And I would not have learned to know these names of God, it's one God, but He's so big, He needs lots of names. And it was because I was at the end of my rope.
Amazing. Well, interestingly enough, this is really not a coincidence. I like to say coincidence is when God chooses to remain anonymous, kind of like how I accidentally met my mentor, Ginny Wassink, who we're fortunate enough to be here with us today. But coincidentally, I am in a Bible study right now called The Names of God.
Is it with the Kay Arthur book?
It's with the Kay Arthur book.
That was the book on my desk.
That was the book on your desk.
And that was the one I just feasted on every lesson.
Now I have chills because we didn't talk about that in our pre-interview, and that's on my desk right now. So, and we just did El Shaddai.
Oh, my favorite.
Yes, yes.
Have you found a favorite yet?
I haven't found a favorite. I keep being amazed. Like you said, all these names I didn't know, and now that I'm knowing and studying them, I'm starting to recognize where he's been all the time, even where I was calling out.
That's what happens.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Well, I want to talk a little bit more about your second book when we come back from the first clip. Okay. We're going to show a clip of an interview you did in California. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You are out there carrying the message all over. So thank you for being here, Judy.
I love it.
All right. So we'll go to the first clip now, please, crew.
Now, you got married, you had 3 kids, close in age, and then you started a ministry. How did that all start?
I don't know if it's called a ministry. You just take one day at a time. You show up for the challenges. God pulls you through. And people say, wow, you're a woman of courage. I say, I've never been a woman of courage. I have a big God. So ministry to me is just doing the dailies, knowing that I'm inadequate, knowing that He's the all-sufficient God. El Shaddai. He's my favorite of all the names of God.
And El Shaddai means all-sufficient. Wow. Now you read a book, actually, or you wrote a book, and you're working on a second book. Tell me a little bit about your book.
The first one is called His Majesty in Brokenness. It was originally going to be The Majesty of Brokenness, but as I wrote the 30 stories, Jesus kept popping up in every plot. And so it had to be His Majesty in Brokenness, and the subtitle is Finding God's Masterpiece in Your Missing Piece. And so here I am missing some big parts of my body, but God showed up. And one of my friends says, Judy, you may be missing physical limbs, but you have spiritual limbs that run people right into Jesus' presence.
Wow, it is. I'm just listening to you, and your contentment, your peace, your happiness, you're saying God's in charge. It was divine. I'm like, wow, wow, you know.
That's one side of me.
Of course.
I did a recent interview, and the gentleman said, Judy, do you ever get angry? And out of my mouth popped, always.
What?
I know. I thought that is not a Christian correctness.
No, wait a minute, because it's an honest, truthful moment.
Yeah, so I have a lot of anger. It frustrates me when something is inaccessible. It frustrates me when I can't reach the last sock in the dryer. So I am humbled by the fact that out of one side of my mouth comes praise and out of the other side, grrr.
Yeah, yeah.
So my God is one that takes me like I am and wraps me in his robe of righteousness, and I know it's all from him.
It is. It really is. You know, I never would think about one sock all the way in the back of the dryer and those small,
It's
simple
those
details.
little things that break us. And yet in being broken, that's the best place to find Jesus.
Right.
Because he
right.
doesn't condemn us. He just says, come to me, little lamb.
And it doesn't matter what we've done, right? It doesn't matter what we look like. When we turn to God, when we say, Jesus, help me, he's there.
So Judy, that
Yes,
was
dear.
a fabulous interview. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was really lovely. And the second clip we're going to speak about will be Dr. Dobson's interview of you. You got on a national radio show. Is that correct?
His family life he retired from Focus on the Family.
Oh, he did. I
And the
didn't know.
next day, he started another radio program with his son, Ryan. And it's called Dr. Dobson's Family Talk. That's what it's called.
Fabulous. Okay. I wasn't aware of that, but the interview is wonderful. I did hear the interview.
I prayed for that for 30 years.
Did you really?
Uh-huh.
Well, God's the author of time, so we don't
He's
get to pick
in
the
no
time,
hurry,
right?
is he?
Evidently not. Got a few out there still. Well, that's just wonderful. I'm curious as to how that came about. Tell our audience a little bit about how Dr. Dobson contacted you or found you.
Well, David and I were invited to a gathering in Palm Springs last Valentine's Day.
Oh, almost a year ago.
It was almost a year ago, and there were 40 couples and 3 days of just being educated and loved by a Christian ministry. And Dr. Dobson and I never really talked,
Really?
but we overlapped. And so I had written a blog after getting home, and it was called Where's Dr. Dobson? Because many people like you, Britt, didn't know he was no longer with Focus.
Right.
So they lost track of him, and here he was for 3 years doing all these broadcasts. So
I see.
someone emailed him the Where's Dr. Dobson? And he said, oh, I think this girl wants to be on the program. Let's call her.
Fantastic. I wondered how that came
So
about.
don't give up on your prayers, folks.
Yep. That's a great message. Prayer is so powerful, like gravity and what moves the ocean in and out that we can't see.
Yes.
It's just a reality that I love to live in. And it's
Exactly.
invisible. However, I believe it's more powerful than what we actually see.
Yes. Thanks
So-
for the reminder.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I need to remind you anything.
I
It
think
seems-
you do.
Well, Dr. Dobson's interview of you you flew out there, right? Because you have a picture with you and your husband, who's been so wonderful, by the way, in helping us pull this together and helping you throughout life, I know. Did you fly somewhere for that then?
We flew to Denver, and then I spoke at a couple places, and then we combined the interview with a couple other opportunities.
Wonderful. So you had some other speaking engagements, and then you just fit Dr. Dobson into your schedule.
He was the highlight of the century.
That is just really fabulous. And did you get to meet his wife?
No,
Okay.
she was down traveling somewhere else.
Well, I think he mentioned she's read your book.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and listen to that interview then. And during the interview, we will have a picture of you, your husband David, and Dr. Dobson. And then I believe we also have a still of your books.
Right.
All right, good. So thank you. Here we go to the
I've
audio
discovered
interview.
about
Judy
broken
Squier,
people.
Dr. Dobson.
Whether it's mental illness, emotional, social, physical, that God tucks His glory in those places. And so it's...
You don't feel at this stage of your life deprived, shortchanged, insulted by life. You don't carry any of that today.
No.
You're in a wheelchair. You cannot get out of there and run around and shop and do everything everybody else does, at least while walking. And yet you're not unhappy over that.
No. The joy of the Lord has made up for all of that.
I've said it twice. Now I'm going to say it for the third time. Judy, you're a very special lady and an inspiration to Shirley and me. And I appreciate so much you coming to be with us. Your 2 books. The first one is His Majesty and Brokenness. There's a photograph of you and your dad here on the cover. It's written by Judy Squier, our guest today. Finding God's Masterpiece in Your Missing Piece. And the other book is Living in the Names of God. You said there are 18...
There were 18 Hebrew names that showed up when David shattered his ankle, and I needed help from above. And so those have been my bulwark as I have journeyed through this life without legs.
As a place to end today, and this is the second day, I would like you to speak directly to somebody out there who is today where you were, who feels worthless, who feels shortchanged by life, who feels maybe God doesn't even care. And what would you say to them if they were here?
I would say that that is the reality that is defined by earth. Yes, you are feeling insignificant, you are feeling unvalued, and what can you give to life? Can you make a difference? But Jesus Christ is cheerleading you on, and in Him you are going to become His masterpiece. And I say, don't quit before the happy ending. The happy ending will come. And the punchline to me, my mom, who was so wounded, knew before I was born that she wanted to name me Judy. She didn't know that Judy means praise. Mm-hmm. And so it was her broken daughter who taught the whole family how to praise. And that's why it ends in joy, but it's still boot camp going through it. But don't miss Jesus. They're in the pit with you, and He will bring you out, and He will glorify not just His name, but you in the process.
Wow, well, how special was that?
It was long waited for, and it was, I would say it was one of the top 5 things in my life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
After the husband, child number 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
Well, I
and
guess
Dr.
Jesus would be
Dobson.
first, right.
And Jesus is in it all.
Right. Well, congratulations again. That's really neat. I know you've delivered a message of hope to a lot of people.
We all need that message.
Yeah, we sure do. Yes, we do. So I would love it if you would share with the audience a little bit about this wonderful shoe, this golden shoe, and really the symbolism of what it means to you. I know your father's involved. It's on the cover of your first book.
And it's in this, it's when my name is written on stationery or on books, the gold shoe has to be there, because the gold shoe is the testimony that Jesus shows up. And the gold shoe was not gold. It was brown or white. It's an orthopedic shoe.
That's an actual orthopedic shoe?
This was the orthopedic shoe. It has the rivet holes. It was riveted to the metal stilts I wore until I was 10.
Wow.
And we didn't like the shoe. We didn't like the shoe because my sister had a closet full of shoes every color of the rainbow.
Oh, and you just had the one pair of shoes that fit into the metal stilts you had to wear every day.
Exactly.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was an object of shame and pain. And so when I exchanged my metal stilts for artificial limbs, the metal stilts ended up in the garage on a nail.
Wow.
And one day my dad was out there puttering and he saw the stilts and he just went, oh, the memories of the challenges of fathering a child with a disability.
Well, I can imagine. Well, I probably can't imagine, but even what I can imagine is probably 1/10 of what he went through. And here you are, and here he is. I mean, look at this. Him trying to balance you, and you figuring out balance in these little stilts. Just amazing.
So as the memory of the hard part came back to him, it was like God tapped him on the shoulder and said, wait a minute. Judy went away to college. She got a degree. She had a life as a speech therapist. She married, has children. And my dad's conclusion was this story has a happy ending. So he went down in the cellar and he put the stilts in the vise and sawed through the rivets.
Wow.
And he held the shoe in his hand and it no longer could be brown. So he sprayed it gold and brought it out to me.
Oh, fantastic. What year was that, Judy, that he brought it out to you?
That had to have been probably in the 80s.
Amazing.
So I was mothering little girls, and the girls knew this was a family trophy.
Right.
And if there was a fire in our house, 3 girls, so 2 were assigned to a leg, and then 1 was assigned to the gold shoe. And so it carries verses. It carries my dad's verse. He knows the way that I take, and when God has tried me, I shall come forth as gold.
Beautiful.
So that's from Job. And then my verse, I'm an old lady, I'll be 70 in a year and a half.
Wow, congratulations.
My verse, the affliction you gave me, God, it's the best thing that could have happened to me. For it caused me to pay attention to your statutes. They are more precious to me than silver or gold.
Beautiful.
So this shoe has traveled the world with me, and moms with disabled children have cradled it and kissed it.
Wow.
And I know I can't take it with me, and the girls are trying to decide who gets it.
A little bit of a wrestling match over that.
Yeah,
Well, it has been with you. You take it when you travel, don't you? When you have
I do.
international speaking?
I do.
And you have spoken in other countries, haven't you?
In Romania and in Thailand, yes.
Amazing. Well, for
It's
a woman-
very dear to me. And what the universal message is that God is going to take what we don't like in our lives, what we would press the delete button on and get rid of it. And that's where He wants to meet us. That's where
amazing.
He wants to comfort us, bottle our tears, and carry us out of the pit into whatever He has planned for us, whether it's a life of singlehood or marriage or parenting, ministry. So we have to know that the bane of our existence is actually the blessing.
It often ends up that way, doesn't it?
But going through the boot camp, you wouldn't believe it could be.
I can testify to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm so grateful you're here. And we're going to look at your third interview now. Interview with Perry Atkinson on the Dove television.
Right.
So here we go, audience, with the third interview for Judy Squier.
Did you ever get angry at God?
Always. I mean, I'm a contradiction. Out of one side of my mouth, I praise Him, and out of the other side of my mouth, I get disgusted with my life's lot. But it's gotten more and more praise out of this side of my mouth because He's shown up, and He's faithful, and He's shown me that our brokenness is what is the bridge to that intimacy with our Savior.
You know, sometimes, Judy, God says no. You know, I think now talking to you, I've interviewed Johnny Erickson Todd on many occasions where she's prayed for God to intervene, and the answer was no. How did you handle that?
Grumpy. I've got a grumpy side, but even in the no's, he companions with us. And he doesn't just say no and close the door until it becomes a yes. It's in the no's that we are desperate enough that nothing in this world can satisfy us but him.
You know, you speak of loneliness, and I don't think any of us could understand that kind of loneliness, because you really are isolated, at least from your era of time. You know, you and I are almost the same age, so when we were growing up, we didn't have all these modern technologies and things that we got today. So I don't know, how would you describe that loneliness when you couldn't be with the other children and your family really didn't want you around?
It was a pit. It was a dark pit. And yet, and in my book, I write the story of that loneliness. It's the 24-karat miracle. And how my sister's friends would take her over to their house and I'd be left at home. And I found our piano and I would sit and with my 8 fingers I would play hymns. And it never was joyful, but come to find out as I've looked in the rear view mirror, Jesus was on that piano bench with me. I was not alone. So as my sister with the full calendar, as she grew into young adulthood and looked back, she realized that I was the 24-karat miracle because I had Jesus. And so my lonely life was a bridge to her finding the Savior.
Oh, that's beautiful. When did you realize that your life had meaning and had purpose?
I think it's been a little here and a little there. At age 13, my dad had me giving speeches. And I'd look out at the audience and I'd tell them about learning to walk on artificial limbs and then learning to walk with Jesus Christ. And I felt like I had something that was encouraging to them. So, and my family always cheered me on. So I knew I had purpose, but there's still that loud voice inside that says, loser, loser, loser.
Oh, wow.
So it's been layer upon layer, being in the Word, writing the stories, having 3 daughters that adore me, my husband of 45 years, I'm his queen. Little by little, I can finally hear God saying, I'm lovable.
Well, how wonderful was that? That was really a beautiful interview, Judy. Thank you so much for being here today. You can find Judy at www.judysquier.com. I'm assuming your books are for sale on the website.
Or Amazon.
Or Amazon. Wonderful. Congratulations again. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Judy. We look forward to having you again.
I'll be back.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on Passion, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.